Hello and welcome to our new video on ASME B31.3 series. In this video, we are going to talk about chapter 6, which is inspection, examination, and testing. This video series is intended for the people who are working towards API ICP examination, especially for API 570, that is piping inspection. And it is also good for the people who just want to learn about process pipes or just want to learn about ASME B31.3. So in this chapter, first of all, we'll have to understand that this document has two different criteria for inspection and examination. In this document, the examination means the non-destructive examination that you are going to do, and the inspection are going to be the activities performed by the owner's inspector. Okay. So inspection, this code distinguishes between the examination and the inspection. Inspection applies to the functions that are performed for owner by the owner's inspector or owner's delegate. So it can be an owner's inspector or it can be an inspector of a third party organization that is in contract with the owner. The reference in this code to the inspector are to the owner's inspector or owner's inspection delegate. Responsibility for inspection. It is the owner's responsibility exercised through the owner's inspector to verify that all required examination and testing have been completed to inspect the piping to an extent necessary. To be satisfied that it confirms all applicable examination requirements of the code of the engineering design. So the responsibility of the inspection is going to be the owner's responsibility, because the inspection who is doing is an owner's inspector or a person that owner has hired for the inspection. Okay. The rights to the owner's inspector and inspector's delegates shall have access to any place where the work concerned with the piping installation is being performed. This includes manufacture, fabrication, heat treatment, assembly, erection, examination and testing of the piping. They shall have a right to audit any examination, to inspect the piping using any examination method specified by this engineering design, and to review that all certificates and record necessary to satisfy the owner's responsibility as stated in paragraph 340.2. Qualifications of owner's inspector. So owner's inspector need to have some amount of qualification there. So the owner's inspector shall be designated by the owner and shall be owner or the employee of the owner, or he can be employee of an engineering or a scientific organization, or an employee of a recognized insurance or inspection company acting as the owner's agent. So he can be an owner's employee, or he can be an employee of a scientific or engineering organization, or he can be an employee of a insurance agency. The owner's inspector shall not represent or be an employee of the piping manufacturer, fabricator or erector unless the owner is also the manufacturer, fabricator or erector. So you cannot have a employee of the manufacturer to act as your owner's inspector, provided that the same organization is making a piping for their own organization. The owner's inspector shall meet one of the following criteria. Shall have at least 10 years of experience in design, fabrication or examination of industrial pressure piping, each 20% of the satisfactory completed work towards an accredited engineering degree, and shall be considered to be equivalent to 1 year of experience up to total 5 years. Have a professional engineering registration or nationally recognized equivalent with at least 5 years of experience in design, fabrication or examination of industrial pressure piping. Be a certified welding inspector or the senior certified welding inspector as defined in AWS QC1. That is, he can be a CWI or a SCWI with at least 5 years of experience in design, fabrication or examination of industrial pressure piping. Can be an authorized piping inspector as defined in API 570 piping inspection code, in service inspection, rating, repair and alteration of the piping system with at least 5 years of experience in design, fabrication and examination of the industrial pressure piping. And in delegating the performance of the inspection, the owner's inspector is responsible for determining that a person to whom an inspection function is delegated is qualified to perform that function. So at least one of these criteria are to be qualified for a person to be considered for being an owner's inspector. This is examination. Examination applies to the quality control functions performed by the manufacturer, fabricator or erector. Reference in this code to an examiner is the person who performs quality control examinations. Responsibility for the examination. The inspection does not relieve the manufacturer, fabricator or erector of the responsibility of providing the materials, components and workmanship in accordance with the requirements of this code and engineering design. Performing all the required examination and preparing a suitable records of examination and test for the inspector's use. So, no matter the inspection is getting done by the owner's inspector, but it does not relieve the manufacturer from these responsibilities. Examination, general requirements. Prior to initial operation, each piping installation, including components and workmanship, shall be examined in accordance with the applicable requirements of paragraph 341. The type and extent of the additional examination required by the engineering design and acceptance criteria to be applied and shall be specified. Joints not included in the examination required by the paragraph 341.4 or by engineering design are accepted if they pass the leak test as required in 345. Next is acceptance criteria. Different kinds of acceptance criteria for different kinds of non-destructive examination is given in this chapter itself. So if you're doing radiography, visual testing, magnetic particle testing, liquid penetrant examination, ultrasonic examination, so all of the acceptance criteria are given in the respective tables and paragraphs. Casting, the acceptance criteria for casting is specified in 302.3.3. Defective component and workmanship. So whenever you identify a defect or whenever the inspector identifies the defect, it is the responsibility of the manufacturer to solve that defect, to do some repair operation, and then it can get accepted. So defects shall be repaired or a defective item or work shall be replaced. Discontinuities detected outside the area required to be examined during the weld joint examination should be evaluated and resolved in the manner acceptable to the owner and designer. The examination shall be as follows. When a defective item or the work is repaired, the repair portion of the item or the work shall be examined. So once the repair is done, repair was successful or not, for identifying that again an examination is required. The examination shall use same methods and acceptance criteria employed for original examination. When the defective item or the work is replaced, the new item or the work used to replace the defective item or the work shall be examined. The examination shall use any method and applicable acceptance criteria that meet the requirements of the original examination. Progressive sampling or examination. When the required spot or random examination reveals a defect, two additional samples of same kind from the original designated lot shall be given same type of examination. So if there is, let's imagine if you have one weld specimen that you are inspecting randomly, if that fails, then two additional welds are to be inspected to clarify the condition. If those two fails, then again 4 examinations are needed for the 4 specimens. So it is a progressive sampling that is done. If the items examined by A above are acceptable and the defective item shall be repaired or replaced and re-examined as specified in the paragraph. If any of the items examined as required by A above reveal a defect, further 2 samples of the same kind shall be examined for each defective item found by that sampling. If all the examined items are required by C above are acceptable, then the defective item shall be repaired or replaced and re-examined. If any item examined as required by C above reveals a defect, all items represented by progressive sampling shall either be repaired or replaced and re-examined, fully examined and repaired or replaced as necessary, and re-examination as necessary to meet the requirements of this code. If any of the defective items are repaired or replaced, re-examined, and defect is again detected in the repaired or replaced item, continued progressive sampling in accordance with A, C and E is not required based on the new defects found. The defective item shall be repaired or replaced and re-examined until the acceptance as specified in the paragraph 3.341.3.3 is done. Spot and random examination is then performed on the remaining unexamined joints. Extent of required examination. Examination, normal fluid service. Normal fluid service is generally going to be a default category. The piping in the normal fluid service shall be examined to an extent specified herein or to any greater extent specified in the engineering design. So these are the minimum requirements that are given. That is always going to be true whenever we are talking about any kind of code. Any code will give you the minimum requirements. Obviously more stricter requirements can obviously be followed, but these are the minimum requirements that are given by the code. The acceptance criteria as stated in paragraph 341.3.2 and table 341.3.2 for normal service unless otherwise specified. So visual examination, at least the following shall be examined in accordance with the paragraph 344.2. Sufficient materials and components selected at random to satisfy the examiner that they conform to the specification and are free from defects. At least 5% of the fabrication as defined in paragraph 300.2 shall be examined. 100% of all completed weld except those in the components made in accordance with the listed standard paragraph 341.5.1a for examination of the longitudinal welds required to have a joint factor or joint efficiency factor greater than 0.90. So if you have a joint category greater than 90%, in that case 100% inspection shall be done visually. Random examination of the assembly of a threaded, bolted and other joints to satisfy the examiner that they conform to the applicable requirements of paragraph 335. When pneumatic testing is performed, all threaded and bolted and other joints shall be examined. So these are various kinds of weld imperfections. So this is lack of sidewall fusion, where weld metal and the base metals are not sticking with each other. This is again the lack of fusion between passes. So it is interpass lack of fusion. In this case, this is incomplete penetration due to misalignment or due to mismatch. This is again incomplete penetration, but there is no mismatch here. This is a suck back or a root concavity at the bottom side due to excessive root gap. This is root undercut and this is cap undercut or external undercut. Okay. This is excessive reinforcement. So these are the kinds of defects generally you will be able to find with visual testing. Obviously visual testing will only tell you if a discontinuity is present on the surface. In that case, in some cases, you will not be able to find lack of fusion type of discontinuity by just doing visual. Okay. So this is acceptance criteria for welds, visual and radiographic examination. So different kinds of categories given. So this is normal and category M service, severe cyclical conditions and category D fluid service. In this case, different types of product are also given, product forms. So girth, meter, groove, branch weld connections, groove welds, fillet welds. Same thing here for severe cyclical condition and same thing here for category D services. In this, crack, everywhere crack is written as A. This A can be found in the notes below. So A is extent of imperfection. Crack was A, but crack is not acceptable in any case. So crack is generally not acceptable for any service requirement. Lack of fusion, some criteria are given here, incomplete penetration, some criteria are given here and something like that. This will tell you that what kind of discontinuity can be found with visual and what kind of discontinuity can be found with radiography. Again, some other criteria are given. So for rounded indication, generally a cumulative length should be identified. For lack of fusion in very dangerous services or category M services, in that case lack of fusion would not be accepted. But if it's a category D services, then it again depends on what kind of length or what kind of extent the lack of fusion is. Porosity, slag inclusion will generally have some tolerance or acceptance criteria associated with them. Next, the random examination during erection of the piping, including checking of alignment, supports and cold spring, examination of the erected piping for evidence of defects that would require repair or replacement, and for other evident deviations from the intent of the design. Other examination, not less than 5% of circumferential butt and meter groove weld shall be examined fully by random radiography in accordance with paragraph 3445 or by random ultrasonic examination in accordance with 344.6. Not less than 5% of the circumferential butt weld to be examined by radiography or ultrasonic testing. Okay, so no matter how many circumferential joints you have, at least 5% of those are to be tested by random radiography or by random ultrasonic examination. When the circumferential weld with an intersecting longitudinal weld is examined, at least the adjacent 1.5 inch of each intersection weld shall be examined. That means whenever you have a section where longitudinal and circular section are intersecting, so generally you will have a T section. In that case, wherever your weld is, 1.5 inch on either side need to be inspected. Certification and records. The examiner shall be assured by the examination of certificates, records, and other evidence that the material and the components are specified grades and they have received required heat treatment, examination, and testing. The examiner shall provide the inspector with the certification that all quality control requirements of the code and other engineering design have been met and carried out. So, some document review also needs to be done by the inspector. The inspector will generally do document review such as mill test certificates, quality control charts, heat charts, pyrometric charts. All of these document reviews are to be done and it should be satisfactory to the inspector. Examination of category D fluid service. The piping and piping elements for category D fluid service as designated in the engineering design shall be visually examined in accordance with paragraph 344.2 to the extent necessary to satisfy the examiner that the component, material, and workmanship conform to the requirements of this code and engineering design. The acceptance criteria are as stated in paragraph 341.3.2 and in table 341.3.2 for category D fluid service unless otherwise specified. So in the table we have seen in 341.2.3.2 we have seen for category D services these criteria are given for visual and radiography. Next is visual examination. Visual examination, the requirements of paragraph 341.4.1a apply to the following exceptions. All fabrication shall be examined, all threaded, bolted and other joints shall be examined. All piping erection shall be examined to verify that the dimensions and alignment are correct. Supports, guides, point of cold spring shall be checked to ensure that the movement of the piping under all the conditions of startup, operation and shutdown will be accommodated without undue binding and unanticipated constraint. Other examination, all circumferential butt and meter groove welds and all fabricated branch connection welds comparable to those shown in figure 328.5.4.e shall be examined by 100% radiography in accordance with the paragraph 344.5 or by 100% ultrasonic examination in accordance with paragraph 344.6. Socket welds and branch connection welds that are not radiographed shall be examined by magnetic particle or liquid penetrant methods in accordance with paragraph 344.3 or 344.5 or .4. In process examination in accordance with the paragraph 344.7 supplemented by the appropriate non-destructive examination may be substituted for examination required in B above on a weld for weld basis if the specified in engineering design or specifically authorized by inspector. Certifications and record, the requirements of paragraph 341.4.1c shall apply. Examination for elevated services. So if you are working with elevated services, if you have a high temperature piping system, then this paragraph would also be taken into consideration. Supplemental examination, spot radiography. For longitudinal welds, spot radiography for longitudinal groove welds required to have a weld joint factors of 0.9 or greater shall be radiographed in accordance with the paragraph 344.5 of at least 300 mm, 1 feet in each 30 meter or 100 feet of weld for each welder or welding operator. So at least 1 feet needs to be checked for 100 mm. 1 feet needs to be checked for 100 feet. For 100 feet of weld for each welder or welding operator. Acceptance criteria are those stated in table 341.3.2 for radiography under normal fluid service, circumferential butt welds and other welds. It is recommended that the extent of examination shall not be less than one shot on one in each 20 welds for each welder and welding operators. So one shot on one in each 20 welds. So one weld should be checked for each 20 welds. Unless specified otherwise, the acceptance criteria are as stated in table 341.2.2 for radiography under normal fluid service for the type of the joint examined. Progressive sampling of the examination, the provisions are given in paragraph 341.3.4 are applicable. We have already seen what is progressive sampling. The welds to be examined, the location of the welds and the point at which they are to be examined by the spot radiography shall be selected or approved by the inspector. Next is hardness test, examination to resolve uncertainty, Personal certification. So personal certification, a person can have n number of certifications, but they should be qualified in radiographic testing. In non-destructive examination. In ASME section 5, article 1, for general requirements that are given that the person should have at least some amount of certification. They can have an SNTTC 1A certifications or CP 189 certification or even ISO 9712 certifications or third party certifications are also allowed. So non-destructive examination requirements for this code shall be qualified and certified for the method to be utilized following a procedure as described in ASME BPVC section 5 article 1. Examination procedure. Any examination shall be performed in accordance with the written procedure. Types of examination. So visual examination. Visual examination will generally be done by ASME BPVC section 5 article 9. Magnetic particle testing would be done with the requirements of ASME section 5 article 7. Some acceptance criteria are given here. So the acceptance criteria for magnetic particle testing and for liquid penetrant testing are generally similar. So for magnetic particle testing, the linear indication is one having a length greater than 3 times the width. Rounded indication is one having a length smaller than or equal to 3 times the width. Any surfaces that are examined shall be completely free of any relevant linear indication, any relevant rounded indication greater than 5 mm, and 4 or more relevant rounded indication in a line separated by 1.5 mm or less edge to edge. Same thing for liquid penetrant examination, but the liquid penetrant examination will be done in accordance with ASME BPVC section 5 article 6. Again, the acceptance criteria is same. So acceptance criteria is linear indication having a length greater than 3 times the width. Rounded indication is one which is circular or elliptical and the length is smaller than or equal to 3 times the width. The examination, all the surfaces to be examined shall be free of relevant linear indication, relevant rounded indication greater than 5 mm, 4 or more relevant rounded indication in a line separated by 1.5 mm, edge to edge or less. Radiography examination. Radiography examination shall be done in accordance with ASME BPVC section 5 article 2. Extent of radiography. 100% radiography. This applies only to girth and meter groove welds and to fabricated branch connections weld comparable to figure 328.5.4.e unless otherwise specified in the engineering design. Random radiography. This applies to only girth and meter groove welds. Spot radiography. This requires a single exposure radiograph in accordance with the paragraph 344.5.1 at the point within specified extent of welding. For girth and meter and branch groove connections, the minimum requirement is for sizes less than or equal to 60 DN65 or NPS 2.5 inch, NPS 2.5, a single elliptical exposure or an elliptical shot is needed to encompass the entire weld circumference. So in the elliptical shot, in a single film, you will be getting the entire weld circumference on the film itself. For sizes greater than the N65, the lesser of 25% of inside circumference or 152 mm or 6 inches. For longitudinal welds, the minimum requirement is 152 mm of weld length. Ultrasonic testing, this is true for weld examination. So whenever you are doing ultrasonic examination for welds, the ASME BPVC section 5 article 4 is generally applied for weld examinations. Acceptance criteria are given here. The discontinuity is unacceptable if the amplitude of the indication exceeds the reference level and its length exceeds 6 mm for weld thickness less than or equal to 19 mm. Weld thickness divided by 3 for T equal to 19 to 57 mm and 19 mm for thickness of weld greater than 57 mm. Fracture based mechanics ultrasonic examination acceptance criteria in appendix R may be useful for all the requirements of appendix R are met. In-process examination. In-process examination comprises the examination of the following as applicable: joint preparation and cleanliness, preheating, fit up, joint clearance, internal misalignment prior to joining, variables specified by joining procedure including filler metal for welding, position and electrode, for brazing, position, flux, brazing temperature, proper wetting and capillary action, for welding, conditions of root pass after cleaning, external and where accessible internal aided by the liquid penetrant or magnetic particle examination when specified in the engineering design, for welding, slag removal and weld condition between passes, appearance of the finish joint. All of these are to be done in process. Next is leak testing. Prior to the initial operation and after the completion of the applicable examination required by paragraph 341, each piping system shall be tested to ensure tightness. This shall be done a hydrostatic leak test in accordance with the paragraph 345.4 except provided herein. At owner's option, a piping system in category D fluid service may be subjected to an initial service leak test in accordance with paragraph in the lieu of hydrostatic test. So, leak testing can be done in lieu of hydrostatic test provided owner's approval is achieved and provided it's a category D services. When the owner considered that hydrostatic leak test is impractical, either pneumatic test in accordance with paragraph 345.5 or a combined hydro-pneumatic test can be done in accordance with paragraph 345.6 may be substituted. When the owner considers both hydrostatic and pneumatic test is impractical, the alternative is given in paragraph 345.9 and may be used if both of the following conditions apply. Hydrostatic test would damage the linings or internal insulation, contaminate a process that would be hazardous, corrosive, or inoperative in the presence of moisture, require a significant support modification for hydrostatic test load, or present the danger of brittle fracture during the low metal temperature during the test. Pneumatic test would present an undue hazard of possible release of the energy stored in the system, present a danger of brittle fracture due to low metal temperature during the test, and unless specified in the engineering design, lines open to the atmosphere such as vents or drains downstream of the last shut-off valve need not be leak tested. The requirements of leak testing, again leak testing requirement is again given in ASME section 5. So limits on pressure, reduced pressure. If the test pressure would produce a circumferential or longitudinal stress in excess of the yield stress at the yield strength at the test temperature or greater than 1.5 times the component rating at the test temperature, the test pressure may be reduced to a maximum pressure that will not exceed the lesser of the yield strength or 1.5 times the component rating at the test temperature. For metallic bellows expansion, appendix X can be used. Other examination requirements: examination for leaks. The leak test pressure shall be maintained for at least 10 minutes and then all the joints and connections shall be examined for leaks. Heat treatment. Leak test shall be conducted after heat treatment has been completed. Special provisions for testing: externally pressurized piping, jacketed piping, test records. So these are the test records that are required after leak testing. The record shall be made for each piping system during the testing, including date of the test, identification of the piping system tested, test fluid, test pressure, certification of results by the examiner. These records need not be retained after the completion of the test if the certification by the inspector that the piping has satisfactorily passed pressure testing as required by the code is retained. So leak test, hydrostatic test. Hydrostatic test is again important because in API 570 the hydrostatic test requirements were the same as the requirements given in the original construction code, which is B31.3. So the test fluid will generally be water, provided if you are using water and your pipe get damaged by the water, then you will not use water. So the fluid shall be water unless there is a possibility of damage due to freezing or due to adverse effects of water on the piping or the process. In that case, another suitable non-toxic liquid may be used. If the liquid is flammable, its flash point shall be at least 49 degrees Celsius and consideration shall be given to the test environment. Test pressure, except as provided in the paragraph 345.4.3, the hydrostatic test pressure at every point in the metallic piping system shall be as follows: not less than 1.5 times the design pressure. When the design temperature is greater than the test temperature, the minimum test pressure at the point under consideration shall be calculated using this. So generally, the pressure testing is going to be done at 1.5 times the design pressure requirement, or if the design temperature is greater than the test temperature, the minimum test temperature shall be found by this. So PT is gauge pressure, 1.5 times the design pressure into ST. ST is allowable stress at the test temperature divided by S, that is allowable stress, that is given by appendix A. Hydrostatic test, pneumatic test. If hydrostatic test is not possible, pneumatic test can be done. Test pressure for pneumatic test is 1.33 times the design pressure, and the pressure should not exceed 90% of the pressure. The pressure shall not be, okay. The pressure for, this is pneumatic test, okay, leak test. The test pressure shall not be less than 1.1 times. So it should not be less than 1.1 times, shall not be greater than 1.33 times, and shall not exceed the lesser of these. 1.33 times the design pressure, and the test pressure would exceed 90% of the pressure described in paragraph 345.2.1. Next is sensitive leak test. The method, the sensitive leak test is generally bubble test or bubble leak test, or variation on the bubble leak test, that is going to be a vacuum box test. So the test shall be bubble test, direct pressure technique in accordance with the ASME BPVC Section 5 Article 10, Mandatory Appendix 1, or another leak test method that is demonstrated the sensitivity not less than 10 raised to minus 3 standard atmospheric temperature ml under per second under the test conditions. When the bubble leak test, the direct pressure technique is used, the test pressure shall be at least the lesser of 105 kilopascals or 25% of the design pressure. The pressure shall be gradually increased until the gauge pressure is equal to or equal to the lesser of one half of the test pressure or 175 kilopascal is attained, at which the time a preliminary check shall be made. Then the pressure shall be gradually increased in the steps until the test pressure is reached and the pressure being held long enough at each step to equalize the piping strains. Alternative to leak test is also given here. Then examination for welding. The welds, including those used in manufacture of the welded pipe and fitting that have not been subjected to hydrostatic or pneumatic test in accordance with this code, shall be examined as follows. Circumferential, longitudinal and spherical welded groove shall be 100% radiograph in accordance with the paragraph 344.5, or if radiography is not an option, then 100% ultrasonic testing shall be done as per the requirements given in 344.6. All welds, including structural attachment welds not covered in A above, shall be examined by using liquid penetrant method or magnetic particle method, depending on what kind of weld it is. Next is records. It is the responsibility of the piping designer, manufacturer, fabricator and the erector as applicable to prepare the records required by this code and by engineering design. Retention of records. Generally there will be a contractual requirements to retain these records for the manufacturer. So unless otherwise specified by the engineering design, the following record shall be retained for at least 5 years after the record is generated for the project. Examination procedures, examination personnel qualification and examination reports. These kinds of records are to be retained for at least 5 years as per this code. Again, contractual requirements can be different from this. This is the minimum requirements. Okay. So that's it for chapter 6. So this was ASME B31.3 series. Chapter 6, up till chapter 6 it is for default service. Chapter 7 is for non-metallic piping and for some specialty piping for category M, toxic services, high pressure, high purity services. Different chapters are there, but these 6 chapters are going to be the default criteria for any piping system that is going to be made by ASME B31.3. That is this for this video series. In the next video series, we'll be talking about something else, probably about repair of the pressure equipments. So that's it for this video. Let's meet in the next video series. Thank you.